I scoured the whole of Brazil to find the 8 best cities in Brazil. And I assessed them based on criteria, how organized they are, how good the infrastructure and the roads are, and what the crime levels are like, the job opportunities, and the cost of living. So let's jump straight into the list, and at number 8 is the city of João Pessoa. This is the capital city in the state of Paraíba in the northeast of Brazil, and it has over 800,000 inhabitants. And it's also a very old city with lots of history, so it's actually considered the 3rd oldest city in Brazil. And it dates back to the 16th century. And it's also quite a beautiful and green city, so it's been called one of the greenest cities in Brazil, and that's partly because it's got a large park in the center of the city called Jardim Botânico Benjamin Maranhão, and this has 515 hectares of woodland and forests in the center of the city, which is very unique and very beautiful. And in terms of the main attractions in the city, it has to be the beaches. And the 2 principal beaches are Praia de Tambaú and Praia de Manaira. And this beach has some coral reefs a bit further out. It's very popular for people to take boats out there and enjoy the natural pools. And because this is a beach city, the vibe is really nice and relaxed. And you've got lots of bars and restaurants near the beaches. And I think this is a really nice aspect of the city. Also, another very positive thing about the city is that it never really gets very cold. So in summertime it can get pretty hot, in the high 30s. And in winter it can go down to like 20 degrees, but usually not much below that. So if you're someone who hates the cold in wintertime, then this could be an ideal city for you. And then finally, another positive about the city is the fact that the cost of living is relatively low. So we look at housing. So if you want to buy a property, the cost per square meter is 7,965 reais per square meter, which is $1,530. So you can see João Pessoa is kind of in the middle in terms of how expensive property is. So there definitely are cheaper cities. But in terms of being able to buy a property in a city with really nice beaches, it is relatively good value for money. And the same applies if you want to rent a property. So the cost of rent per month in João Pessoa is 49 reais per square meter. But there are some negatives about the city. So the first one is that the economy of the city isn't that strong. So the GDP per capita is 34,000 reais, and that's significantly below the average for the whole country, which is 59,000 reais. And you'll see this trend for the majority of cities in the northeast of Brazil. So their economies in general are not as strong and very reliant on tourism, while the economies of the cities in the southeast and the south of Brazil in general are stronger, because that's where the majority of the big companies and the big industries are. So it isn't the easiest to move to this city and find a decent paying job. And also connected to that, with the city not having the strongest economy, the infrastructure as well, so I'm talking about hospitals, schools, roads and so on. In general, they're not as good as cities further in the south. And then finally, the crime. So if we look at the homicide rate, so the homicide for João Pessoa is 24 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants. And you can see that's a relatively high rate and put João Pessoa towards the bottom. But obviously, homicides is just one crime, there's lots of others, but this kind of gives you an indication that crime is relatively high in João Pessoa. So I think João Pessoa is a great option for anyone who wants to live near nice beaches, have a relatively low cost of living, and is less focused on employment. Okay, and the next city is Brasília. This is the capital of Brazil. It's located in Distrito Federal, and it's pretty big. It's got 2.8 million inhabitants, and it's located in the central western area of Brazil, far away from the coast. When I visited Brasília, I thought I wouldn't like the city at all, but the city surprised me and I actually quite liked it. So it's quite a new city. It was constructed in the 1950s, and it became the new capital of Brazil in the 1960s. And it's a planned city with lots of large highways, and there's a man-made lake in the middle as well called Lago Paranoá. And in this city is where the federal government of Brazil is located. So you've got the Palácio de Planalto, which is the workplace of the president of Brazil. And you've got the Supreme Court, the Senate, and then also the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house. And then lots of parks and open spaces as well. And I kind of like the planned structure of the city. And it's a very affluent city, so the GDP per capita is 129,000 reais. And one of the main reasons for this wealth is due to the government. So a large proportion of the inhabitants in the city work for the government. So you've got all the government agencies in the city, from health, education, defense, and then also all the big government-run companies as well. So all the state banks and the post office and all of these companies are in Brasília as well. And then you have lots of private companies as well, providing services to the government. And all of this creates a strong economy for Brasília. And because of a strong economy, it means that the city has a fair bit of money to invest in infrastructure. So hospitals, schools, universities, roads. So all of these are pretty well funded and quite good here in Brasília. And then you have lots of shopping malls, exclusive stores and restaurants as well. So you can definitely see there's a lot of wealth in this city. And then another positive is the crime. So the crime in the city is very low. So if you look at homicides, it's just 8 per 100,000. And I felt very safe walking around Brasília. And I could see police everywhere when I went walking around. But there are some negatives about the city. So the first one is the climate. So it can get very hot in summertime, so in the high 30s. In winter it doesn't get very cold. It can fall down to like 15 degrees Celsius. But the city does have a very dry climate, especially in winter time, where the humidity in the air can be very low. And I could feel that dryness in the air when I was there. But maybe over time you get used to it. But it was definitely something I noticed. And then the other thing is that the city is far away from the beaches. So if you want to go to a beach, you're going to have to fly. So it's a 2-hour flight to get to Rio de Janeiro, or a 3-hour flight to some of the cities in northeast of Brazil, like Recife, which again has nice beaches. And then the final negative point is that it's quite an expensive city, which shouldn't really come as a surprise because it's very affluent. So if we look at housing, so the cost per square meter of buying a property, that is 9,978 reais. So it's not the most expensive city, but it is towards the top. And if we look at rent, the cost per month per square meter is 51 reais, which again is relatively high. So I think this city would be great for someone who doesn't want to live close to the coast. They just want to live in a big city, which is affluent and safe. Okay, and the next city is Vitória in the state of Espírito Santo. This is a coastal city located in the southeast of Brazil with a population of around 300,000, and it's not located too far away from Rio de Janeiro. So it takes about an hour by plane to get to Rio de Janeiro, or about an 8-hour drive. And it's a very beautiful city, lots of parks, nature, mountains surrounding it, and it's also got very nice beaches as well. Some of the main beaches are Praia de Cambori and Praia do Canto. And it's also a very old city with lots of historical architecture, which dates back to the 16th century. And another positive about the city is the climate. So it's hot all year round. In summertime you can get to the high 30s, and in winter it can fall to like 20 degrees, maybe a few degrees below that. And then another positive is the economy as well. So that's quite strong. So the GDP per capita of the city is 87,000 reais. And a big part of the economy are the 2 ports in the city. So you've got the port of Vitória and the port of Tubarão. And so the commerce connected to these ports generates a lot of wealth. And then you've also got some other big companies. So you've got Petrobras, which is the big state-owned oil company in Brazil. You've also got Vale, which is one of the biggest mining companies in Brazil. And then also the city has quite a big steel industry. So the job opportunities in the city are relatively good if you want to work in those industries. And also with a strong economy, the city is able to invest in its infrastructure, which is decent, but not as good as some of the cities further south. But there are some negatives about the city. The first one is crime. So crime rate is relatively high. So if you look at homicides, it's 22 per 100,000. You don't have Vitória on this diagram, but you have Vila Velha, which is a city very close to Vitória, just on the other side of a bridge, which has more or less the same crime rate. And then another negative about Vitória is the high cost of living as well. So if we look at housing, the cost is 14,429 reais per square meter if you want to buy a property. So this is one of the highest prices in the whole of Brazil. And also looking at rent, the price is 54 reais per square meter, which again is towards the top end. And this is partly because it's quite an affluent city and it has lots of nice beaches. So I think Vitória is a great option for someone who's after nice beaches, an affluent city, and they're not put off by the high cost of living. Okay, and the next city is São Paulo. So this is the largest city in Brazil. It's got over 12 million inhabitants, which is bigger than the whole of Sweden, which only has a population of 10 million. And actually I think it's quite a beautiful city. It has lots of parks. One of my favorite parks is Parque Ibirapuera. It's one of the biggest parks in Sao Paulo. It's got a lake, lots of restaurants and cafes. And also another nice area is Jardim Botânico of Sao Paulo as well. And you have lots of museums, art galleries, and then lots of restaurants and bars and shops as well. So Sao Paulo has the largest shopping mall in South America, and it's called Shopping Arincanduva. And then you have lots of luxury stores as well, and many options for restaurants and bars, especially in the neighborhood Villa Madalena. And another positive about the city is its economy and job opportunities. So Sao Paulo is the economic capital of Brazil. The GDP per capita is 93,000 reais. The only other city with a higher GDP per capita is Brasília, which I mentioned earlier. Sao Paulo is just full of big companies. So the majority of the big multinational companies, they have their headquarters in Sao Paulo or on the outskirts. Sao Paulo is also the financial center of Brazil. So the majority of the banks and investment companies are in Sao Paulo. And then you also have a big manufacturing industry. So if you're looking for a good job, then Sao Paulo is your first choice. And then another positive about the city is that in general it's quite safe, it's got low crime levels, so the homicide rate for the city is 5 homicides per 100,000. So this is the lowest of all the big cities in Brazil, but this figure does hide some big differences. So Sao Paulo has some big favelas where crime can be higher, and also in certain areas in the center of Sao Paulo it can also feel a bit dodgy, and there's one area in particular called Cracolândia where you definitely don't want to go. But in terms of the negatives of Sao Paulo, the big one being it's very expensive. So if you look at the cost of housing, so to buy a property, the price is 11,945 reais per square meter. It's one of the highest in the country, and rent is also very high at 63 reais per square meter. And also in terms of just the size of the city and the fact that some of the infrastructure just can't cope with the number of people. I mean, Sao Paulo has some good infrastructure. So I mean, the underground I was quite impressed with. I would say it's better than the underground in London or Stockholm. But other things like the road network, that can get super busy, massive traffic jams. And they've tried to introduce these restrictions on the cars that can come into the city. But even with that, the traffic can be horrible in Sao Paulo. And also in terms of the climate, so it can get very hot in summertime, and with the city just being so big with so much concrete buildings, it can feel very, very hot in summertime if you're in the city. And in winter the temperatures are pretty moderate. They can go down to like 10-15 degrees, so nothing too cold, but the summers can be very hot. So I would say Sao Paulo is a great city for someone who's really focused on their career and also really likes going out and shopping and doesn't mind the high cost of living. But if you're not one of those people, then probably Sao Paulo isn't for you. Okay, the next city is Curitiba, which is the capital of Paraná in the south of Brazil. It's got a population of 1.7 million inhabitants. It's also located away from the coast, takes between an hour and 2 hours to drive to some nice beaches in Paraná. Now I think this is a very beautiful city. It's very organized, all surrounded by lots of forest and green areas, and then in the city as well there are many parks, the most famous one being Jardim Botânico, but there are many other parks as well, and there's lots of bars and restaurants and shopping malls as well. And the most famous areas with lots of bars is Alameda Prudente de Moraes and Rua Vincent Machado as well. It's got quite a strong economy, and so the GDP per capita is 67,000 reais. And the big industries are manufacturing, technology and services. And you've got some big companies located in the city, so for example Electrolux, Bosch, Volvo, and also some banks have some big offices here as well, like Bradesco, Itaú, Vivo as well. And so the city has attracted some big businesses. So the job opportunities in the city are pretty good. And also the city is pretty safe as well. So the homicide rate is 10 per 100,000 inhabitants, which is pretty low. There are only a couple of other big cities which are lower than that. And when I was there, I felt very safe walking around. And also another positive about Curitiba is the infrastructure. So in general, the infrastructure is very good. So there's lots of public transport with buses, and also the roads are well maintained. And they also invest a lot in schools and hospitals. So these are also pretty good. And actually many people call Curitiba the Europe of Brazil, because they see Curitiba as a very organized city with good infrastructure. But there are some negative. One of them is the climate. So in summer it can get relatively hot, but similar to many other cities that I mentioned. But in winter it can get pretty cold. And that's because the city is quite elevated. It's 930 meters above sea level. And so in wintertime, it can actually go into negative figures. And then another negative is that Curitiba is quite expensive. So if you look at property to buy, so price per square meter is 11,569 reais, and rent is 46 reais per square meter. So there's a bit of difference there between renting and buying property. But my experience in Curitiba in general is that the cost of living is relatively high. And then another negative is that Curitiba is not on the coast, and yeah, you can drive for an hour or two to get to some nice beaches in Paraná, but if you want to get to the really nice beaches, then you have to drive to Santa Catarina, talking about like a 4-hour drive. So I think overall Curitiba is a very good city to move to. So it's quite a big, affluent city. So you've got some good job opportunities and also very organized. So as long as you don't mind it getting a bit cold in winter, then this could be a great city for you. Okay, and the next city is Florianópolis. So this is the capital of Santa Catarina. It's in the south of Brazil, and it's a coastal city, and it has a population of around 500,000. And one of the big attractions of this city is all of its nice beaches. So the city has over 40 beaches. So some of the most popular ones are Jurerê International, Daniela, Campeche, and these are very nice beaches, nice sand, turquoise water. Many of the beaches have lots of vegetation around them. So the beaches are really nice. And then they also have 2 lagoons as well. Big one being Lagoa de Conceição. And here you can do lots of water sports. And then you also have lots of bars, restaurants and cafes along the lagoon. So this is also a very nice area. And you have lots of shopping malls as well in the city. My favorite shopping being Vila Romana, but there are many others as well. And also the center of the city is also very nice, where it's got quite a big market called Mercado Público. And then another positive about the city is it's got quite a strong economy as well. So GDP per capita is 58,000 reais. And the biggest industries in the city are the IT sector, manufacturing and tourism as well. So you've got some big companies like Intelbras, Pixon, Meditech Softland and Mercado Libre as well. They have big offices in Florianópolis. And then also every summer millions of tourists, I think last year it was 3 million tourists, came to Florianópolis during the summer to enjoy the beaches. So with a relatively strong economy, job opportunities in the city are pretty good. And then another positive about the city is the crime as well, which is very low. So the homicide rate is 7 per 100,000. So that's the second lowest on this list. Only São Paulo has a lower rate. And I can definitely say that when I was in Florianópolis, I felt super safe. And in terms of climate, it can get pretty hot in summertime. It can sometimes go up to 40 degrees. And in winter, it can get a bit cold. It can go down to like 10 degrees Celsius sometimes. But the winters are pretty short, so it doesn't get too cold. In terms of the negatives of the city, so one of them is the tourism. So the fact that millions of tourists descend on the city every year means that the city gets very, very busy in summertime. So the roads can get super busy, also the stores and the shopping malls as well. So you really do have to consider this if you're planning to live in Florianópolis. And also another negative of the city is that it's quite expensive as well because of the high tourism. So if you look at the cost to buy property, it's 13,000 reais per square meter, and the rental is 60 reais per square meters. So both of these are very high, which means you're going to spend a lot on housing, and then also other costs are going to be high as well because it is quite a touristy city. So I think Florianópolis as a city is great. So if you want to be close to nice beaches and have lots of options for going out, then Florianópolis will tick all of those boxes. But there is this one big drawback, and that is all the tourists that go to the city in summertime. And the next city is São José dos Campos. And this city is located in the state of São Paulo, not too far away from the city of São Paulo. It's about an hour's drive, and it has a population around 700,000. Many say it's the best city in the state of São Paulo, and I agree, it is a nice city. So it's quite organized and quite green as well, so it's got lots of parks. So some of the big ones are the Parque Vicentina Aranha and also Parque Roberto Burle Marx. And also just outside the city you have Represa de Jaguari, which is this lake that's formed when they built this hydroelectric dam. And that's a very pretty area as well. And then the city also has the Brazilian Aerospace Memorial due to the importance of this industry to the city. And just like the city of São Paulo, São José dos Campos is also very affluent and has a strong economy. So GDP per capita is 88,000 reais, and the key industries in the city are technology and manufacturing. So you've got the headquarters of Embraer, the big Brazilian aircraft manufacturer. You also have Panasonic, GM, Johnson & Johnson, and many other big companies. And so as a result of that, the job opportunities in the city are very good. And with the city being affluent, you have lots of nice restaurants, stores, shopping malls as well. And also in the infrastructure in terms of schools, hospitals, universities, and roads, they're all pretty good as well. And in terms of the climate, so I mean, it can get a bit hot in summertime, but we're talking about like in the 30s. And in winter, it doesn't get too cold, around 10 degrees. But it can get a bit colder than the city of Sao Paulo, and that's because it is 600 meters above sea level. And another positive is the low crime in the city. So the homicide rate per 100,000 is 5, which is very low, and it definitely feels like a safe city when you're there. And then another positive is that it's pretty close to the city of Sao Paulo. So it takes about an hour to drive to the city of Sao Paulo, and the roads connecting São José dos Campos to Sao Paulo are big and well maintained. And it also only takes about an hour to drive to the beaches as well in the state of Sao Paulo. And these beaches are really nice. You've got Caraguá, Ilhabela, and Ubatuba, and many others. It also only takes about an hour to drive to the mountains as well. So you've got the city of Campos do Jordão, which is quite famous for being a very nice mountain town. And so São José dos Campos is located really well, and you can reach all these locations pretty quickly. But there are some negatives. So first of all, the cost of living is a bit elevated here. So I mean, it is cheaper than the city of Sao Paulo, but comparing it to some other cities that I mentioned earlier, then it is still elevated. So if we look at buying a property, the cost per square meter is 9,151 reais, which is towards the top end, and for renting the price is 46 reais per square meter, which is more reasonable but still not cheap. And then the other negative is that the nightlife in the city is a bit limited. So I mean, you have lots of bars and restaurants, but it's nothing compared to the city of Sao Paulo. So if you're after a city with a good nightlife, then this might not be the city for you. Okay, and then number one, the best city in Brazil, I think, is Gramado and Canela. So Gramado has a population around 35,000 and Canela 45,000. Now I guess you would call them towns rather than cities, but they're so connected, so I kind of see them as just one city in the mountains. And so Gramado and Canela, they're located in the Serra Gaúcha, which is the mountains in Rio Grande do Sul, which is the most southern state in Brazil. And they're located about a 2-hour drive from the capital of Rio Grande do Sul, Porto Alegre. And these two towns have a very strong German and Italian influence. And both of them are very organized, very beautiful. So they're surrounded by forest-covered mountains. There's lots of waterfalls in the area, the most famous one being Cascata do Caracol. And also the architecture of the buildings have a very German, Italian influence as well. And also Canela has a very beautiful cathedral as well. So all of this makes Gramado and Canela very picturesque. And as a result, they receive a lot of tourists each year. So apparently last year they received 7.9 million tourists. And so there's lots of hotels, over 150, lots of stores selling souvenirs, arts and crafts, and you have lots of attractions as well, and theme parks, and many, many restaurants. So as a result of all of this tourism, Gramado and Canela are very affluent. So the GDP per capita for Gramado is 88,000 reais, for Canela it's 40,000 reais. And this is relatively low, and I think that's partly because Canela is a more calmer, more residential, touristy town compared to Gramado, and so this figure doesn't really represent how affluent Canela is, because it also is very wealthy. And so with all of this wealth from the tourism, the two cities invest a lot in making sure the infrastructure is good. I do remember reading about some residents complaining about the lack of water due to the high demand from all the hotels, but I know the local governments are investing a fair bit to resolve that. So overall the infrastructure is very good in Gramado Canela. And then another positive is that the crime is very low. So when I searched for homicides in Gramado Canela, this came up, which said that there was one homicide last year in 2025. And if we look at the Numbeo website, just to see what the crime level there is, there it classifies the crime rate as very low at 11. So here you can walk very freely and not be worried about crime. But no city is perfect, and that includes Gramado Canela. So one of the negatives, well, for certain people, is the climate. Gramado and Canela are quite elevated, so they're over 800 meters above sea level. and that means that the climate can get pretty cold in winter. So when I've been there, I've experienced temperatures which have gone below 0. Actually, now and again it snows there. And then with summer, it never gets that warm, usually in the high 20s. And so this can be a positive or negative depending on if you like the heat or the cold. And also another thing is that these cities can have a fair bit of fog as well. And so the cities can get covered in fog. It can make it a bit difficult to drive around. And so some people say it can get a bit depressing when you have lots of foggy days. And again, it all just depends if you see it as positive or negative. And then another negative is the high cost of living as well. So everything from restaurants to stores is quite expensive because they have tourist prices. Now, if you do live there, you do get discounts in many restaurants if you just show that you live there. But still, it is pretty pricey. And also property is expensive because everyone wants to buy an apartment in the mountains in Gramado, Canela. So the price of properties is very high. So the cost per square meter of buying a property in Gramado is 18,000 reais, while in Canela it's a bit cheaper at 14,000 reais, which is higher than all the cities that I showed you earlier. And also the cost of rent as well is pretty high, 65 reais per square meter. And so both of these are pretty expensive. But even though Gramado and Canela are very affluent, there aren't that many job opportunities unless you want to work in the tourism sector. So yeah, if you're someone who's after a great paying job in a big multinational, then yeah, this definitely isn't the place to live. But even with these negatives, I really like Gramado Canela, especially Canela because it's a bit calmer, less touristy, and a bit less expensive. Okay, so that was my list of the best cities to live in Brazil. So I tried to cover a wide variety of cities, some really big ones with great job opportunities, and lots of restaurants and shops and nightlife, but also some smaller cities that are calmer, more for families, and for people who are retired or work remotely. So thanks for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe, and if you got any comments, if you agree or disagree with my list, then put it in the comment section below. So thanks for watching, until next time.